Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us for the concept development workshop. Hopefully you guys have all had a chance to actually view these webinars live. But again, we wanted to kind of record this just so that you've got a resource for it to then kind of look back on. Or if you didn't have a chance to attend the actual workshop live, then you've got a chance to view exactly what we covered in that. So this is the first of 4 workshops, and this workshop is focusing on concept development. And a little bit about me. So my name is Tom, and I'm the founder and designer at Little Mammoth. And we at Little Mammoth, we design products, experiences, and services. And I'm here to give you a bit of an insight into the product development process. The concept development process, and yeah, it's going to help you move your projects forward. So what are we here to do? So we're here to learn about the new product development process. We're here to develop your ideas, hopefully moving them forward. And we're here to help you complete your workbook. So a lot of the tasks that we're going to be undertaking today are going to be related to tasks that will help you complete your workbook and fill in all the information required. And ultimately, what we want you to do is to snap up that prize. So, yeah, we want to give you all the skills and the tools available to give you the best chance of success here. What we're going to need today. So, in this session, hopefully you can all hear me and see me. In an ideal scenario, if you're then kind of looking back on this, you're able to kind of go through this and speak to your other team members, and maybe you've set up a separate kind of Skype call or Zoom call to allow you, when you're kind of going through and completing these exercises, you can then kind of share them with your team members who are potentially kind of in lockdown somewhere else in the local area or the country. We're going to need worksheets 1 to 5, some post-it notes and some pens. And this session is going to be quite a lot to cover. So it's kind of high energy, and we want you guys to be kind of raring to go, essentially. What we're going to cover. So in this workshop, we are going to be covering the concept development process and all the stages involved in that process. We're going to be covering external team resources and all the people that can help at kind of different stages of the process, but also kind of what they do and what their outputs are. We're going to be talking about the user journey, and we've got an exercise here to kind of go through that to help you kind of get a better understanding of the user experience. And we're going to be helping you to create your design brief. It's a really important kind of phase to kind of have that clarity and some guidelines to design around. We're also going to be doing a kind of a mini ideation session, which is all about generating lots of great ideas. And we're going to be kind of looking at concept visualization, which is basically kind of going through some of the tools and some of the methods that you could use to help communicate your ideas in the best way possible. And if we are on the kind of session live, you'd see that actually we have a kind of a Q&A session. But yeah, for this webinar, obviously that functionality is not available. So let's kind of crack on straight with the content. So here you can see essentially a kind of a guide or a sort of schematic layout of how we actually develop ideas. So this is a kind of an overview of the new development process. And the double diamond is a philosophy and a methodology that actually most designers will use, and most different kind of industries and sectors kind of essentially solving problems will use a very, very similar double diamond kind of philosophy and method. And what it is, it's broken down into 4 different areas. It's broken down into a discover, a define, develop, and a deliver phase. And it's about how we structure our thinking. So at first, we want to go kind of really broad. So in that discover phase, we want to kind of explore ideas. We want to ask questions. We want to interrogate. And then we want to kind of then move down and focus a little bit more. So the kind of double diamond is that we have 2 phases of going broad, coming up with lots of information and lots of ideas, and 2 phases where we kind of come together and we really focus to essentially kind of create a fantastic design solution at the end of that. And we start at a point where we have a problem, We then kind of go through a broadening and a focusing phase, where we then kind of have create our design brief and kind of define what that problem is. And then we go into another broad and then focus phase, where we are then actually looking at creating a single solution at the end of that. And in the next couple of slides, I'll kind of go through different ways that, or different, in more detail, those different phases that we go through. So the first phase is the discover phase, and this is a kind of really important phase regarding learning, and basically that's kind of what it comes down to. It's all about research. It's all about learning as much as possible about the subject matter, about the users, and about the kind of the topic in general. And what we do here is we often talk to people. We ask lots and lots of questions. We read articles and search the internet. And we also, one of the kind of most crucial things is we observe people. And here you can see an example of an observation study kind of taking place where we want to actually not only pick up on the things that people actually talk about and they communicate, but actually the things that they don't communicate, like body language and their behaviors and things. And it's really important to understand those if we're going to understand our problem and design a better solution to cater for it. And someone that can help you in this phase is a researcher. And a researcher is there to help you find the right people. They're there to conduct user studies and connect with users. So it's really important that not only are we talking to the people who are our target user group, but we're also connecting with them. And so we actually kind of can build a rapport, because if we can build a rapport with them, we get a kind of better set of answers and we get a kind of more clear truth from them when we're talking to them. They also help to kind of ask unbiased questions. So we don't want to lead people down a path. We want them to give their true, honest responses. And obviously with this kind of session and these kind of exercises, there's a lot of information created. It's a lot of data, lots of videos, lots of recordings, and they can help kind of collate that data for you. We then move into the define phase, and this phase is essentially about kind of making sense of all that research findings. You've probably got, you've gone really broad and you've got lots and lots of information, and essentially you kind of want to just make sense of it and you want to understand kind of where that comes from. And we use techniques to analyze that research. We identify themes. So often when we're looking at people and we're studying behavior, we can see these patterns forming. And within those patterns, we want to kind of know why. And by sort of identifying these themes and these patterns, we can kind of get a bit more knowledge about what's actually happening. We also explore opportunities, and those opportunities are things that we then latch onto when we're actually designing, and that kind of starts to formulate some of the scope for our design brief. And then this phase essentially culminates in creating that design brief, and that design brief is there then to kind of be as a reference kind of moving forward with your design project. Who can help here? So strategists, someone that is there to help kind of make sense of this information. They can help conduct workshops and they can help you to manage the process. It's often important to get someone who isn't necessarily on the core team, the core project team, to do this, because they have a better sense of what the objective is, and they're not kind of involved in the day-to-day element of running the project. So they can kind of look at the bigger picture. Essentially, they can see kind of what needs to be done and what needs to be achieved, and they can help you achieve that themselves. We then move on to the develop phase, and this is where, so we've basically created a design brief and we're using that as a launch pad to move forward with. This phase is all about creativity. It's all about creating lots and lots of ideas. It's about sketching, it's about drawing, it's about planning, and it's about evaluating those ideas against that design brief. And once and kind of during that process, you can actually kind of conduct that internally within the team, but actually you might look to get the help of a designer, and that's where someone like myself can come in. We can help you to solve the design problem. We can help to communicate those other ideas, and that's one of the crucial things is actually we are here to help bring those ideas to life. You might also uh, use there's lots of different types of designers that you might be utilizing. It depends on the type of project that you're kind of working on. So if you're looking at a product based project, you might employ someone like an industrial designer who is more focused on developing products, and they have a kind of great deal of expertise there. You might also then, if you've got a kind of more system-based, service-based project, you might use a service designer, and they're very, very good at understanding complex problems where they need to kind of walk through these small steps that are bigger part of a bigger challenge. And you might also want to kind of have a UX designer. So UX stands for user experience, and that's a type of designer that designs anything to do with digital interfaces, mobile, web-based applications, those kind of things. You also might have a design engineer involved. So if you've got a very technical brief to solve, you might employ a design engineer, and they're might be mechanically or electronically minded, but they have a better technical knowledge than some of the other designers, and so they can help you to kind of move your project forward from that standpoint. So where are we in the process at the minute? So we're right at the start. So we're kicking off our design journey, and we're at that discover phase, and it's all about understanding our problem. And one of the tools that we use to understand the problem is a framing exercise, and it's about framing the design objective. So kind of what do we want to get out of the project moving forward? So it's very, very good for allowing us to identify that problem. It helps us kind of collate some of those insights, those initial insights. And also, it helps us to identify users. And that's one of the crucial things. You might have heard of a term called user-centered design. And that is essentially something that underpins everything that we do as designers. And again, any kind of product or project development. So it's really important to always focus on the user. And the key thing at this stage is to identify who that user is. It's really important also to have a solid start point. We want to be successful. We want the project to be successful. So we need to kind of have that kind of solid foundation to start from, so we have that momentum driving forward. And it also allows us to align our team. So it's very, very relevant for you guys. You guys are going to be working as a collaborative team, and it makes sense that you're all in alignment and you're all on the same page, making sure that you're following that clear direction moving forward for your project. And prior to the workshop, we asked you to complete, if you had time, the framing design objective, which is worksheet 1. It is basically was an idea to, you've obviously developed such great output for your submission so far, but this worksheet was there to try to get you to get your head back into the project. And as you can see here from this example, it's about just identifying those kind of initial things, those initial elements of the problem itself, the key users, some of the what's the key research findings, and also just to kind of frame your design objective in a really kind of concise manner. So yeah, hopefully this tool was useful for you, but also it's something that you're going to go away and complete to help you to kind of understand that kind of start point of your project. So we want to kind of move into one of the first exercises that we'd like you to complete, and that's about mapping the user journey. So we're in that discover phase. We've understood the problem, we've framed what our objective is, and we now want to kind of move forward and understand more about our users. So we use this as a research tool to find out and understand a bit more about the task that our users kind of go through. Also, to kind of get into the shoes of those users, is important to empathize with who they are, and also to kind of understand exactly kind of what things they have to kind of go through. It allows us to look at the entire journey as well, not just looking and focusing on the small tasks that kind of happen day to day, but we got to look at what happens at the start. What happens when somebody purchases that product for the first time? Where do they see it? Where do they find it? What happens when they sign up to that service? And then what happens at the end of life as well? So what happens when they want to disconnect that service, or what happens when they want to to recycle or reuse or throw away, dispose of that product. It's really important to look at the entire journey and understand all of those, all of the points where that user actually interacts with that element and that task. And it's a fantastic tool for understanding services. So services is a really quite complex thing to think through. And so when you've got lots of little tasks that are part of a bigger system, it's really important that you understand those little tasks and can kind of map them out essentially. So that's what we want you to do essentially. We want you to use worksheet 2, and we want you to map out your own user journey. So we're going to give you 10 minutes, and we want you to do this in groups if possible, but you can do it as an individual, don't worry. And we want you to choose a user and a task to map. And essentially, they need to be related to your own project. So we want you to walk through the steps that they go through when they're completing that bigger task, and put down the small actions that they actually go through. And along the way, we want you to note down kind of how they do it, where they feel, where they do it, how they feel about doing it, but also then mapping out their experience as well. So if you look at the example that I've got here, so this is my project, this kind of example project, and this project's all about ocean cleanup. And so the user or the stakeholder is an ocean cleanup group, a community group, and the task that we're going to be mapping is how they remove waste from the ocean. So the first thing that they do is that they identify that waste. They then have to travel out to sea to collect that waste. They then have to, once they actually get there and they're out at sea, they need to collect that plastic waste from the surface of the ocean. They then need to store the waste on their journey back. And then when they get back, they need to sort out that waste. And then finally, they need to recycle the waste. And at every stage, I've then just put down little notes, some of the things that I kind of like think about if I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of that user. And then below that, we want you to kind of map that. We want you to map the experience they go through, whether it's positive or negative. So you can see there's a scale there. So if it's really positive, it goes really high at +10. If it's really negative, it goes at -10. And if you kind of plot each stage on that chart, join up the line, you will then kind of get this experience map. And it will kind of give you a sense of, this is an area that is like really negative for the user, and we need to figure out a way of improving that essentially. And this whole exercise essentially is trying to give you a way of getting into the kind of the real detail and the emotional kind of feelings and behaviors of your users, and to empathize with them essentially. So it will kind of give you better insight, and it will kind of give you some interesting insights and nuggets to kind of work with when we're then kind of creating our design brief. So if you're watching this webinar not live, then what we want you to do is set your clock to 10 minutes, as you can see here, and basically complete this workshop, complete this worksheet. If you pause me now, that'd be fantastic, and you can kind of crack on with it. Right, hopefully you've unpaused me now. You've spent 10 minutes or longer if you've needed to complete that worksheet. And it's given you a good understanding of the problem, and maybe even kind of given you some things to think about that you hadn't considered. Right, so we've gone through that discover phase and we've completed that, and we are now looking to create our design brief. So this is one of the fundamental things in our define phase. We've collected lots of information and we've understood it, we've made sense of it. Now we're actually going to be creating that design brief. And essentially that is a set of constraints, some design constraints for us to work around. It's really important that we do work around these constraints, because if you were set a task to design anything, there's no limitations, it actually become quite difficult. And as a designer, we need to have some boundaries to work within, because it allows us to create better design solutions. It is a detailed plan of action essentially, and it allows you to structure your thinking moving forward. And because of that, it needs to be really clear and really concise. But it also, to a certain extent, needs to have some room for exploration. So we don't want to kind of close every door to us. We want to allow ourselves to have some scope to kind of improve things, to get excited about the project. So there is an interesting balance there between how clear it is and how much scope you have to explore. This document is also a reference document that you're going to be using throughout your project. So you're going to be it's going to be a reference point for when you're evaluating your concepts. And the most important thing is that to create a successful design output and to create a successful product or service, it's got to meet the brief. And this is kind of where, if you've got the right information at the brief, it gives you the better chance to succeed with your project. And what we want you to do is we want you to create your own design brief. And this is something that we're not going to ask you to do live here in the session, but because it's being recorded, maybe you could do it. You could pause the webinar and you could then go away and complete it. But essentially, we want you to kind of fill out worksheet 3. And what worksheet 3 is there is essentially a template for you to complete a detailed design brief. So some of the information that we want on there is we want you to kind of put in your overall design objective. That's important to know kind of what the start point is and kind of where you want to get to. You need to kind of put in all the users and the stakeholders. And by stakeholders, we mean people that aren't necessarily direct users of the product or service. They are potentially people that install it, or they maintain it, repair it, or maybe they're not even a person themselves. They're an organization. So it might be a whole community, or it might be a government organization. It can be really quite specific or really quite large scale kind of user groups. We also want you to kind of put in some of the features and the functional requirements. And this is kind of what your thing does. What's it need to be? And this is a key thing to be quite specific here, because this is essentially what you're going to be designing around. We also need to think about considerations and constraints. So what things are kind of constraining us? What does it need to be a certain size, at a certain height? Does it need to be a certain weight? Does it need to do a certain thing that there's no kind of wriggle room on? We also need to think about any assumptions that we need to make. So in a lot of projects, you might not have been able to find out all the answers in the research phase. So actually, you've got to just kind of, to move forward with the project, you've actually got to make some assumptions. And this happens quite often because we actually, as we're developing our projects, we are learning what those assumptions are and we're finding out more information. So it's quite a critical thing there. And it just means that we can kind of move forward and crack on with things. We also need to be aware of any safety requirements. And this is really important from a physical point of view. So if there's going to be some physical requirements, and so, yeah, we need to kind of consider those. But also with this project, we're dealing with artificial intelligence and sort of collating and collection of data. And it's really important to kind of figure out, well, what are the privacy rules and restrictions there, and from a safety point of view. So it's going to be quite a critical section for you to fill in. And we also want you to fill in a cost estimate. And this is always a difficult thing to do. It's difficult for us as designers in industry. It's very much a kind of gut instinct at this stage. It just sort of frames the scope and the scale of your project. So is it going to be like cost £100 to develop? Is it going to cost £10 million to develop? It's those kind of figures we want to kind of put in place here. So yeah, hopefully that all makes sense. And there's some examples online that will hopefully kind of make that easier to kind of run through. And yeah, once you've done that, we can then kind of move on to the next phase. And if you choose to kind of pause this video, yeah, use this resource in kind of whatever way you want to. But once we've completed our design phase, completed our define phase, we then kind of move into the develop phase. And this is, for me, the most exciting phase. It's where it's all about kind of high energy, fast pace, and in this develop phase, we kind of undertake a task called ideation, and ideation is essentially the creation of ideas. And yeah, it's all about kind of creating lots and lots of ideas. It's about letting the imagination kind of flow. And at this stage, there is no kind of right or wrong. Again, in the develop phase, we're going really, really broad. So we want to just get our ideas down and get them on paper, and we can then kind of use our evaluation tools to then go, actually, is this right? Does this fit? We can kind of do that at a later stage. Ideation is about getting stuff down on paper. And it's a very collaborative process, and it's something that we often conduct in large groups. And because you kind of conducting it in a kind of high energy, like lots of kind of people around environment, you end up sort of kind of bouncing off one another. One person might come up with an idea, and then you might be able to build on that, or you might go, oh, that's fantastic, like what if you did it like this? And suddenly, kind of by having more people in the group, there's that kind of that energy that really does kind of make it a great tool for coming up with ideas. And so this leads on to another task we want you to conduct. So we want you to conduct a really kind of mini ideation session. And so we're going to be using worksheet 4. And what we want you to do here is we want you to place 4 post-it notes on this sheet. And on each one of those post-it notes, we want you to sketch up or note down a different idea on each single one. And these ideas are going to be, again, related to your project, different ways of solving your problem. They might be really small ideas, like a detail of a product or a detail of an application, or they might be really big and looking at the kind of the whole thing in its entirety. The key thing is about getting those ideas down on paper. So we're going to give you 10 minutes, and we want you to complete those 4 ideas. And then once those 10 minutes are up, we want you to then select your favorite and then share that with the rest of your team members if you can, and if that's possible. So we want you just to do that very, very quickly. So it's a really kind of quick exercise to just kind of share your thoughts and give everyone a chance to explain their ideas. And I think one of the important things to think about is that we don't work in these kind of little groups, kind of like burrowed away somewhere else. We actually want to collaborate. We want to be able to kind of work well as a team, and it's a really pivotal exercise to learn how to present your ideas. So here's just some examples, and this is kind of what we want your sheet to look like at the end of that 10 minutes. So 4 different ideas. Don't worry about how it looks. It doesn't matter if the sketch is beautiful or if it's just a little stick man. It doesn't matter if it's just a series of words and some notes. The key thing is that it's about getting that idea out of your mind, out of your head, and down on paper. And just do whatever you feel is comfortable. So yeah, set your timer again, and you want 10 minutes. And yeah, we want you to kind of to crack on. So yeah, crack on, spend 10 minutes, and then spend a couple of minutes afterwards sharing your ideas back with your group. So you can pause me now. So hopefully you've paused me, and yeah, you've completed that exercise. So hopefully that was a really useful exercise, and it allowed you to kind of really come up with lots of ideas, and hopefully some of the ideas were shared within your group as well. So we when we're kind of creating ideas, we often have to kind of create a process for getting those ideas out and developing them. And that ideation task, where we're kind of looking at little post-it note ideas, that's the start point. That's the kind of the spark of the idea, that post-it note. We want to then move those ideas on a little bit, and we need to create slightly more resolved concepts. And that's kind of the terminology change. So when an idea is quite sort of new and it's quite loose, it's kind of probably captured in a kind of a post-it note. And when it's been more resolved, it's labeled a concept. And those concepts are thinking about things like how it works, how it looks, how it's produced, and how people use it in a lot more detail than kind of the initial idea. And there's a tool that we use to kind of to go through this stage, and that's called a capture sheet, or a concept capture sheet, and that's worksheet 5. And so this is another task that we want you to move forward with, and it essentially helps you to improve and build out your initial kind of concept, your initial post-it note ideas. And so, yeah, if we could get you to complete this task, again, don't necessarily need to kind of continue this flow, but this is something you could do kind of after the session. But what we want you to do is we want you to, as individuals, complete 3 separate concept capture sheets, worksheet 5. And we want you to, on each one, we want you to develop a different concept. And these concepts can literally be your post-it notes, so building them out. So the most appropriate thing to do would be to choose your favorite post-it note idea and start there. And what we want you to do is come up with a concept title, so something quite quirky, something memorable, something that really describes your idea. We want you to give a concept description, so giving more detail about how it works and what have you. And then we also want you to give to draw out and sketch a bit more of a detailed illustration of that idea. And here's an example of what that could look like. And the point of this worksheet is that there should be enough information down on each worksheet that it allows someone who doesn't know much about your project, they can read that and they can really understand exactly kind of where you're coming from with your concept. So yeah, so once you've all created 3 of these individually, we then want you to come together again and share those ideas. And again, it's just a really important phase to continuously kind of keeping in touch with your group and making sure that you're all kind of sharing ideas, sharing knowledge, and kind of making decisions together. So once you've all shared those ideas, we want you to go through them and score them. So there's a little scoring section at the bottom left-hand side, and what we want you to do here is to score them, and to then to essentially pick your favorite or your highest scoring concept to move forward with. And we want you to kind of bring these together for the 4th session on Thursday, which is the product development workshop. So hopefully that all makes sense, and the examples are all online, so it should kind of help you to walk through some of those things. One of the kind of key things as a designer is being able to kind of clearly communicate your idea. And the capture sheet is one tool that we use, but there's lots of other kind of tools that we use to help visualize our concepts. And some of these tools include things like sketch renders, storyboards, CAD models and CGI renders, and UX workflows. And the important thing to remember is that we need to choose the most appropriate communication tool to move forward with. We don't have to use all of them. Some are more relevant to certain types of projects, so whether it's a product or a service. Fundamentally, we want to choose the most appropriate thing for us at that stage. And that can be based on the skill set that you have. It could be based on what expertise you can bring in, and it can be based on time. Sometimes you just don't have enough time to do the kind of more detailed ways of communicating things. So I'm just going to go through a few examples and giving you a few insights kind of where they can be used and what their benefits and benefits for your project are. So the first tool that we use is something called sketch rendering. And this is a really quick and loose output. It gives a really kind of quite fluid essence of the idea. It's often used at the start of a project when there's lots of ideas being thrown about the place, and it's quite free form and loose. It can be done both in a traditional sense or a digital sense, and hopefully you've all had experience of seeing or even maybe even using or owning iPads, and iPads are great for this kind of sketching directly onto the screen and kind of getting across your idea. It's about understanding form, scale, and aesthetic, and it's a really quick way of doing that. They can be black and white or full color, and they're great for communicating products because they're all kind of about trying to create a 3D form on the page. And you can see here some examples of what that could look like. All the same project, all different executions, and quite quickly sketched up to then be able to explain them to someone else. Another tool that we use is storyboarding, and this is fantastic to kind of visually kind of walk through that story, and it's really good for mapping out a user experience. So it's a very similar tool used in regards to the user journey mapping at the start of the process. We want to potentially be able to kind of map out the designed experience. So we want to kind of talk through how a concept works. This might be done by using illustrations like the example here, or it might be photographs. You might have a prototype that you've created, and you want to take photos of how it's used, and you create this storyboard in a photographic manner. And it's really good for communicating services. So that's the kind of one of the key things. If you've got something quite complex to communicate, you can't really do that in one image. So you need to kind of map out those images, and it gives you a way of navigating through that journey. So 3D CAD and CGI rendering is a fantastic tool, and often a tool that's used further down the development phase. So when you're kind of getting to kind of detailed development, and you kind of want to understand 3D form a bit more accurately. You maybe have sort of some components you want to arrange, and you kind of need to see how they sit in space, and how you might kind of put a package around it potentially. You also might want to understand accuracy of the proportions. It's all well and good having a nice sketch, but actually you need to know exactly how big it is, how wide is it, what are the dimensions of this thing you're designing. And you also will probably one of the fantastic things about this tool is being able to create photorealistic images. And if you want to communicate the output with your design team, but mainly kind of when you're communicating with clients or the final presentation, you want to be able to show, and this tool gives you the ability to do that. You want to be able to show what it would look like in reality, and that's where kind of photorealistic images kind of come in. And the final thing to kind of go through is digital UX workflows. So dealing with anything that's an interface, we need to kind of communicate those ideas in a different way. They're going to be 2D, they're going to be quite static, but actually there's quite complex sort of applications, whether that's on web or mobile, that we need to explain. So we want to explain sort of say some of the steps of interaction. What happens when you press one button or one icon? Where does that take you? And then what are the next steps that allow you to do that? And yeah, these type of kind of communication tools are they could be kind of schematic, so they could be quite loose, and they could be just a series of boxes with arrows going to kind of where the next screen is, or they could be full color like the example here, where actually what you see is a kind of a real life representation of what your phone would look like. And it's a really, really great way of bringing to life the entire interface. So I just want to kind of recap exactly what we've gone through. So we've kind of moved through this double diamond journey, and we've gone through the discover phase, gone through the define phase, and we've kind of gone most of the way through the develop phase. We've framed our design objective. We've researched the topic and observed our users. We've defined our brief, and we've developed some fantastic ideas. And in the next session on Thursday, we're going to be going through the product development phase, and that's mainly the deliver phase. And within that phase, it's all about prototyping. It's about testing and evaluating your idea, and ultimately being able to select the most appropriate final solution. So hopefully you've had some of these tools are going to be quite useful in allowing you to kind of go on that journey. And it's going to be an interesting workshop. But before that, you're going to be talking to Louise on Tuesday about marketing, Erica on Wednesday about business. But hopefully before you get to the session or before you listen to this webinar, we want you to complete those workshop tasks. So if you can complete your design brief and complete the concept capture exercise and come to that session on Thursday related to product development, come with your final idea as a group. It'll be a fantastic exercise and workshop to kind of go through. So just want to say thank you for joining us. So hopefully this has all been very, very useful. All of the exercises are online, and you should have access to all of those. I think you hopefully you're going to got some really interesting tools out of this workshop. And yeah, it's all about trying to understand the problem, understand the user, and choose the kind of the most appropriate tools to then help communicate those ideas. So thanks so much for joining, and yeah, hope that your projects progress well over the week. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.